My husband and I were driving the other day and we passed a small cemetery and we started wondering if it was an Amish cemetery. So it inspired me to do a video about the Amish and how they handle death and funerals. Do they embalm? Do they do it like we, what's the whole process? So we're gonna go ahead and visit that cemetery, and the only way I'm gonna know if it's Amish is by looking at the headstones. I really don't know. And then I'll just answer some of those questions. It's what their practices are for death as opposed to what we practice. On the way, some of the video isn't going to be all about death and just the tombstones, but I wanted to insert life as I talk to you and answer these questions. So I've gathered a little bit of video today of life that's happening out here. You just have to go through Amish country and hit that day when everybody's out and there's a lot of life going on. It's just amazing. So I tried to capture as much of that as I could, and then I have some other clips that I've gotten before, just so you can get an idea of how peaceful it is out here and how slow and humble. It's a wonderful life. So let's start answering some of those questions. The first question that I want to answer is, where do the Amish bury their dead? You will not find an Amish burial ground mixed with English, typically, especially if we're looking at the old order Amish. And they do not go to the church and bury at a church plot because they don't have churches. They have their church services in their homes and they rotate between the families. However, they do want their deceased buried on hollow ground. And because they have church services at their homes, that is hollow ground. Now, each family does not bury their deceased on their own farmland. They basically will section off a plot of land from one of their community members, and then they will use that as the cemetery. In some cases, depending on the community, the state, the Amish and the Mennonites might share a cemetery because, as we've talked about before, their origins are very similar and their beliefs are very similar. So as far as maintaining the land, they'll just mow the grass and maintain the fencing around it, and somebody will be assigned to that. Their grave sites aren't fancy. Like sometimes you'll go to these elaborate grave sites with the stones and they'll say special things in people's name. The Amish basically have a very small and simple stone to represent their dead, and they will have their name, their date of birth, and their date of death, and that's basically it. It's very simple. Sometimes if you go into your very old Amish or the Swiss Amish, you may find that they're using wooden markers instead of stone. An infant or a child will sometimes be laid flat instead of a tall one, pretty much like the English tradition as well. They do use a casket, but it's a very simple pine box. So somebody in the community may make that box and they will use that for the deceased. We've arrived at the cemetery that I was telling you about. It's basically on the side of a road and it's next to a farm. And it just looks like a plot of land that was turned into a cemetery off of that farm. So I thought that it might be Amish, and I'm thinking it's not, because they do not put more than just their name and their date of birth and their date that they died on the tombstone. So everything that I have found in this very small cemetery did not have that. It kind of looks like it's just something that was here probably from a long time ago, and maybe the farmland was bought after the fact. It's interesting, though. I did want to show you the pictures that I got because most of the tombstones, they're all from the 1800s, so I thought that was pretty cool. They're broken. It's being maintained. The land it's being mowed, and it's clean, but some of the tombstones are breaking from sitting here from so long. And I've noticed dates anywhere from like 1832 all the way up to like 1871 as far as what I could read. So really interesting to see. It was. I might have to go down to the county to get some more information on this. But like I said, I was hoping it was an Amish cemetery. It is not. Another dead giveaway was there is a flag there, so there may be a veteran buried right here where you can see the flag. All right, what we're going to do now is answer the next question. Do the Amish embalm the body before they put it in the pine box and before they bury it. And then we'll talk about some of their traditions. Yes, they do embalm their body. The entire process from preparing the body for the funeral and burial, it all usually takes about 3 days, and it involves the whole community. They're all involved. So embalming the body is permitted and is done by a local funeral home. So they do practice that. They're very careful, though, not to apply makeup or anything cosmetic. The person is embalmed and they are just presented the way they died. They don't try to make them look better or correct things or, make them look beautiful or anything like that, because that would be seen as being prideful. Now, as I'm talking, I'm going to be driving you to another cemetery, which I did find out was not Amish either, but I'm going to show you that one, and then I'll tell you how I knew very quickly why it wasn't. But let's talk about some of the other different traditions that they have. One of them is visitation. The Amish have 3 visitations. At their home, the funeral service, and then at the burial ground. So the family and friends can all pay their respects at the family's home before the service. They can also pay respects at the open casket funeral service or at the burial service. Loved ones can choose to see and pay tribute to the deceased at one or all of these viewing opportunities. So pretty similar to the English traditions, except we no longer really present our loved ones in the home, just at the other 2. The funeral services are held within 3 days after the death. It's held at the family member's home, the barn, or the church. Remember, that's where they have their services anyway. Having the funeral at home allows for a more personalized funeral service, but there aren't memorial decorations or any flowers or anything. It's just very, very plain. Sometimes there are kerosene lamps, but the service is kept extremely simple. And these services usually last about 2 hours, and they contain religious sermons and sometimes singing. And then after that funeral service, a post-funeral meal is served at the family's home. They don't leave and go someplace else. They have it right there. What about cemeteries? I had a little bit more about the tradition of actually being at the cemetery. Most Amish are buried at the cemetery and at the Amish cemetery, and a hand-dug grave, pretty personal. And they have a wagon that takes the casket to the cemetery, and 4 close family members or friends will be chosen to be pallbearers. The preacher says a final prayer at the gravesite, and then the family throws sod on the casket. The gravesite, after the service is over, is kept very plain and simple. We talked about that. And even the stone, like I said, only has their name and the birth date and the date of their death. And then the children's grave sites are unmarked, or they just have a flat stone there on the ground. Remember, there's no flowers around the grave site or plants or anything. They pretty much keep everything very simple. So that's how we know that it's an Amish cemetery. Now, the one that you're seeing here, one of the things, obviously there's flowers, there's lots of writing on the stones, but I'm going to show you now the sign that I saw as I drove in, and that for me was kind of a dead giveaway. This was my dead giveaway. I was getting ready to turn in to the cemetery because I wasn't sure if it was Amish, because it's out here in the country, same as the other one, a little bit bigger, a little bit fancier, but I saw the sign, no horse, no wagons. Obviously, it is not an Amish cemetery, and the Amish would have no reason to go in there with their horse and wagons. I hope you enjoyed the information today about our Amish neighbors, and you have a blessed day.